We'll be sending the slides out after, so you should be able to go through all of the information at your own leisure as well. So first of all, to get started, what is carbon literacy? As a brief description, I'd say it's low carbon culture change training. We should hear a little bit more about that through Matthew from West Mids Combined Authority. Thanks for coming along today. And I'd say the focus is on empowering teams to act, thinking about those activities that create emissions and how to pledge to reduce them. So I'll just run through a little bit of the basics about us. This is a really quick intro, and please feel free to use the email address to get in touch with us for a more detailed chat. The important thing to know is that we're an accrediting body. That means we certify people and orgs. So we don't run the training ourselves. We assist you in context-driven training. So that's through experienced training professionals with contextual knowledge and with staff in individual orgs themselves. The training must be 7 to 8 hours of length, that's roughly a day, but that can be chunked as appropriate to you. That can be a full day, a half day of 4 hours, or 2-hour sessions, but the closer together, the better. You'll see Laura's dropped something in the chat for you if you want to open that link and have a little bit more of a look yourself. So the courses themselves, we have 5 toolkits in our suite. You can purchase these with 3-year licenses, which means that you can run the training as many times as you like throughout that 3-year period. You can get bundle discounts for purchasing more than one as well. One of the things that's really successful about carbon literacy, I'd say, is the flexibility of it. So we have 2 main pathways that you can choose from when using our courses. You can take an off-the-shelf toolkit, which will be largely created for you, which helps with capacity issues so that those courses are already made for you to roll out instantly. And those were developed with the department bays of the government and also working groups of councils for that really applied approach. Even the off-the-shelf versions have customizable slides to make sure that the learning is context-based. The other pathway to choose from is accreditation. This might be when you need something with a little bit more context, something very specific to what you'd like to roll out in a more unique way. If you've got the time to build your own course, this is a really great way of making your training. And you can use the 5 toolkits as a jumping off point, or you can build yours from the ground up using the carbon literacy standard. And it's important to know that this is an iterative, supportive process with people from our team, not a pass or fail process. So we will help you in creating your own course for carbon literacy training. So we have our 5 toolkits. It's important to note that the parish, town and community councils toolkits are actually free to access directly for parish and town and community councils. And those authorities or training organisations buying any of the other toolkits will get the community leaders kit for free. So what's in the courses? I'm just going to run through this very quickly, and please do get in touch for a more detailed call if that's something you'd like to find out more about. We'd say that one of the great things about carbon literacy is the transformational arc throughout the day of learning. I'd say the first half of the course is really that climate science and policy, which can be very hard hitting. Lots of things that are hard to stomach in the first section, but always related back to your context. There's lots of stuff about how local authorities can respond to that science and climate change policy, and things about considering your scope 1, 2 and 3 emissions, as well as the co-benefits of taking action now. And the second half of the day is really focused towards problem solving in teams to make sure that we can take the best actions possible together to lower our emissions. So that's a really brief whistle-stop tour, but we're always here to help you. The email address will be in the slides, and we're always happy to chat more about the courses to give you some more detail. But for now, I'm going to hand over to Helena, who's joining us from CDP, and also Matthew from West Midlands Combined Authority. So thank you very much. It's lovely to have you with us today, Helena.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. It's wonderful to see many of you here. My name is Helena Fazeli, and I am the UK engagement lead here at CDP. Thank you, Abby and Laura, for having me today. So I'm here to introduce CDP, the work that we do, and then specifically how we work with local authorities. So if you could please go to the next slide, Laura. And yeah, so I'll start with an intro to CDP. So CDP was founded 25 years ago, well, just under 25 years ago, in 2000. And it was really in response to the global challenge of climate change that our founders began looking for a way to drive more transparency in business and the impact that it has on our natural environment. Since then, CDP has really grown into a global environmental charity with a clear vision, which is to build an economy that truly works for both people and the planet. To realise this vision, it has become clear that we need reliable, comparable data. After all, you can't manage what you don't measure. That's what we like to say at CDP. And so the idea is to focus investors, companies, cities, local governments, states and regions to drive action towards a sustainable world by measuring, understanding and managing their environmental impacts. What that means in practical terms is we run an annual reporting cycle during which we invite each of those stakeholders to report their environmental and climate data. If you could please go to the next slide. So just to give you an idea, in 2023, we had over 23,000 companies report through CDP. So that's on a global level, along with over 1,000 cities and local governments and over 90 states and regions. And then if we zoom in onto the UK, so the next slide. So we began working more closely with UK local authorities in 2018 with support from the Esme Fairbairn Foundation. And we've really seen significant growth in the number of local authorities that we work with. So increasing from 12 local authorities in 2018 to 68 last year. These figures on this slide give you a rough idea of what those 68 local authorities represent in terms of UK emissions, population and GDP. And just to note that we work with local authorities from across all 4 nations and kind of all types of local authorities as well. We could go to the next slide, please. Thanks. So I'm now going to talk a little bit about the details of reporting, what our annual cycle looks like, what's included in the questionnaire, as well as the benefits of reporting. And just to note, CDP ICLEI Track, that's just the name of our portal and questionnaire for cities and local governments. We're partnered with another organisation called ICLEI, which you may be aware of. So yeah, that's just the why behind the name of our portal. So as I said, we run an annual cycle and it really revolves around this process that's represented on this slide. And it all starts with local authorities and local governments taking action. So they might be at different stages. They might just be beginning to understand climate impacts in their area, collecting data. They might already have a climate action plan in place and already implementing kind of projects. Wherever you're at, CDP will support you. So those local authorities and governments then report their data through our portal, through CDP ICLEI Track. CDP then manages the data. So we make all publicly reported data available on our open data portal. And then we also share data with our key partners. And the idea is that CDP then provides local authorities with feedback through a score. So I'll talk a little bit about that in a second. And then our partners also use the data to provide support, technical assistance, and so on. And so the idea is that the kind of cycle gets back to the start, that first step, and it kind of leads to year-on-year improvement and progress. We go to the next slide, please. It's completely free to report, so this includes both accessing the portal and the questionnaire, as well as all of the support and guidance that we provide. There is really comprehensive guidance available against each of the questions in the questionnaire, as well as a dedicated team. So I'm kind of the UK lead in terms of engagement, but my job throughout the reporting cycle is to respond to any questions you have and provide you with support. And then finally, we've really designed the questionnaire in a way that allows for flexibility to cater for the diversity of local authorities that report to us, both in the UK, but also globally. there are no minimum reporting requirements kind of needed, and there's no kind of prescribed methodology. So in practice, this means that the questionnaire can really be adapted to local authorities that are just at the beginning of their climate action journey, as well as those that are already quite advanced. You could just, you know, in your first year, start with the questionnaire, report the data that you have readily available, and then use it as a process to improve in subsequent years. Next slide, please, Abby. So in terms of the benefits that you could get from reporting, firstly, we like to say that CDP ICLEI Track is a one-stop shop for many global initiatives. So that includes the Global Covenant of Mayors, or GCOM, the Cities Race to Zero, the Cities Race to Resilience. We also work with WWF to host their One Planet City Challenge every other year. And so in that sense, CDP ICLEI Track really streamlines local government disclosure into one questionnaire. And in a way, it can be kind of you disclose once, and then all of that information can be used and read by a different, you know, all of our partners as well as other stakeholders. You can also opt into a number of these initiatives through our platform. As mentioned, there's a huge amount of guidance and support available. So whether that's direct emailing and one-to-one calls with the UK team, webinars, and then all of the written guidance materials that are available. We also offer what we call a response check service. So this is ahead of the scoring deadline. We kind of do a preliminary review of your questionnaire, give you a little bit of feedback before you submit, just to make sure there aren't any major gaps or anything missing. We can provide support with setting a science-based target, and then we also score your questionnaire. So that score remains private to your local authority unless you receive the highest score. And we send you a score feedback report to help you understand your score, as well as where you're excelling and then where you need to improve. Reporting isn't just about submitting data. I think it's really a process that can foster collaboration. It can be used as an internal engagement tool. It can drive action. Our questionnaire can be seen as a framework that can help shine a light on what you're already doing and the data you already have, but also highlight gaps and areas for improvement. We often hear from local authorities that kind of completing the questionnaire and going through that process really is really useful. And as I said, can be a good internal engagement tool, because you might have information that doesn't necessarily sit within the climate team. And so you're kind of engaging with colleagues across the council. And then the annual nature of reporting allows you to track your progress year on year. So we have what we call a copy forward function. So it's not like each year you're starting from scratch. First year is a bit more time consuming, I will be honest. But you know, once you've submitted all of that data, it is auto-populated in subsequent years. And so you can come back to it, update, review, add any additional information, and so on. And then finally, the questionnaire is fully aligned with the recommendations of the Task Force on Climate-Related Financial Disclosures. And I've put a link here in the slide, which is a document that kind of outlines how the questionnaire aligns with those recommendations. So do take a look at that if you're interested. Next slide, please, Abby. So our questionnaire covers a broad range of environmental and climate topics, and they're broken into 5 sections, as you can see on this slide. So governance, assessment, targets, planning, and actions. And that covers both kind of mitigation and adaptation. As you can see, the questionnaire follows quite a logical flow from kind of assessment to then setting targets, planning, and then reporting your actions. So I'll come back to that in a second. If we could just go to the next slide. So earlier I mentioned a little bit about scoring, and so I just wanted to provide a bit more information there. So each year we have a scoring deadline, and all of the local authorities and local governments that report by that scoring deadline are included in our scoring process. I really want to stress that this process is not about naming and shaming. It's really a mechanism to drive action. As I said, scores remain private to your local authority. So if you receive anything below an A, it's up to you whether or not you want to share that. And then if you do receive an A, then we generally run this kind of global media campaign celebrating all of those top scoring disclosures. We score local authorities against two main things. Firstly, transparency, and then your kind of level of ambition. And we score across 4 scoring bands, which are represented on this slide. So from disclosure, a D score, so that's the lowest score you can receive, all the way up to leadership, an A score. And these score bands are designed to reflect a local authority's climate action journey. So what we're looking for and the way we score questions at each score band is different. At the disclosure level, what we're really looking for is how complete is your submission, how transparent are you being. At that level, we just want local authorities to use the questionnaire as sort of gap analysis tool to kind of understand what they have, what they don't have, and then take it from there. Whereas at the leadership level, that's where we would start looking for particular answers, because we really want to incentivize best practice and ambitious climate action. And also just to say, the scoring methodology is always made public. The 2024 scoring methodology isn't yet out, but it will be made available. So next slide, please, Abby. So what I want to do here is just very quickly illustrate kind of the practical application of how our questionnaire and scoring methodology can drive action. So focusing on the adaptation content of the questionnaire, just to align with the general theme of this webinar. So within the questionnaire, adaptation is mainly addressed in the 4 questions that are on this slide. So at the very beginning, we ask whether or not you have a climate risk and vulnerability assessment. So that's what we would call kind of an assessment of the risks from or vulnerability to climate change in your area. We also ask you to report on the main climate hazards impacting your jurisdiction. We then move on to adaptation goals. So these would be targets focused on managing the environmental risks that you have identified in your assessment, and then decreasing climate vulnerability and enhancing adaptive capacity. Moving on to plans. So in order to achieve those goals and targets, you need to kind of establish a framework of actions in an adaptation action plan, and then finally adaptation actions. In this question, we ask local authorities to report the most significant adaptation actions and projects that they're currently implementing and planning. So if we go to the next slide, so that was kind of the structure of the questionnaire, and then the scoring methodology will come on top of that, and is what will kind of CDP will use to drive best practice. Our scoring methodology, it's not just CDP developing it out of nowhere. It is aligned with global frameworks and initiatives, including the partners that I mentioned earlier. So C40, the Global Covenant of Mayors, ICLEI. It's also aligned with the Sustainable Development Goals. I'm not going to read through all of this, but just to give you an idea. So for a climate risk and vulnerability assessment, the main things that we look for and really encourage is engagement with a broad range of stakeholders across your kind of local authority area. We want you to consider the impacts of climate change on different segments of the population, paying particular focus to kind of vulnerable population groups. And then we also want you to have a process in place to update or at least review the assessment at least every 5 years. We move on to adaptation goals. So these goals really should address the hazards and risks that you've identified in your assessment, either directly or indirectly. And And ideally, you should have clear quantitative or qualitative indicators in place to kind of track progress and monitor progress towards the goals. On to adaptation planning. So the key things we look for here are community-wide plans, so making sure they cover your entire area. Again, that engagement piece, making sure you're working with stakeholders across your community, and then again having a robust framework in place for monitoring, evaluating, and updating the plan. And then finally, I've outlined what we look for adaptation actions. Yeah, perfect. I'm not going to go through this slide, but as Abby said, the slide deck will be circulated. Yeah, next slide, please. So quickly, where is the data used? So I mentioned earlier, all of the publicly reported data is made available on our open data portal, and that can be used by anyone in the public. You can also search for individual responses. So if you want to look up West Midlands Combined Authorities submission, you can do that by registering an account on our website. Our data is also used globally by governments, NGOs, intergovernmental organisations, policymakers, and so on. It has fed into IPCC reports and the UNFCCC's Global Climate Action Tracker, and then we also produce our own reports in-house. Next slide, please. So this is a bit of a call to action with some concrete kind of next steps. So this is our timeline for the 2024 disclosure cycle. Our platform is opening in early June, the 4th of June to be, so the 4th of June. And the scoring deadline is set for mid-September. So that gives you about 3-ish months to report before the scoring deadline. That said, our platform does remain open until early December, so you can submit at any point until then. Yeah, and then on the next slide, I have provided some links as well as an email address if you would like to find out more about CDP reporting, have an intro call, most likely with me. And yeah, so I've linked our 2024 questionnaire, the 2023 scoring methodology, which will be updated for 2024, our local authorities brochure, which pretty much just summarises what I've said. Aiming for A is a guidance document that we've put together for UK local authorities. We're always looking to kind of build this and expand it. So if you have any examples, tools, resources, please do send them over and we can add them. And then I've just linked our latest UK local authorities report based on the 2023 data. But yeah, that's it from me. Happy to take questions at the end, but I'll hand over to Matthew.
Thanks, Helena. That's great. Yeah, pleasure to be here. I'm Matthew. I'm Environment Programme Officer at the West Midlands Combined Authority. So I thought I'd start off very quickly by explaining who the WMCA are. You can see there's a nice handy map there showing where we are, fairly centrally in the country, in the Midlands, as you'd expect. We have 7 local authorities. We're a mayoral combined authority. You may have seen the mayoral election gave us quite a good high profile over the last couple of weeks. So yeah, we're a WMCA and we work with our 7 local authorities really closely, and that obviously has kind of a relationship in terms of the carbon literacy work we do and also our carbon disclosure work. So as Abby alluded to at the start, we do have quite a good carbon literacy programme. We run an internal carbon literacy training for our members of staff. We've reached almost, I think, well over 15% of the organisation now, which is great. And we've also got a residents course as well. So we're trying to spread carbon literacy amongst the residents of the West Midlands as well. And we are now a carbon literate silver organisation, which is fantastic. But my presentation today will focus primarily on CDP. First of all, I guess I'll start with why we started doing CDP, what the kind of origin of that was. On the next slide, Abby. Thank you very much. Well, you can see ski scores on the doors there as a kind of first point of our transparency. We're really keen to make sure that all the kind of work we do towards net zero and our net zero goal of 2041 is as transparent as possible. I think that's just generally a really good goal to have as an organisation. Obviously, as Helena said as well, your scores are only really made public if you're an A scoring organisation. So that is something we achieved in 2022, and we're really keen to make sure that we're on that A list as regularly as possible. Obviously, we had a slight dip in 2023, and that really links to the accountability point as well. So making sure that we're not kind of resting on our laurels, I suppose, of getting that A in 2022, making sure we're pushing ourselves, and that's really a brilliant aspect of CDP and the fact that it does kind of inspire continual improvement. There's not the opportunity to just kind of wait around, and I've provided a quote on the screen, so I thought I'd so we actually started reporting to CDP before I joined the organisation about 2 years ago. So Jackie said that we took the decision to take part in CDP as an independent audit approach that would indicate our progress year on year, highlighting areas where we could improve. It also integrates us into a network of other local and regional government, providing opportunities to learn and share different ways of working to improve climate mitigation and adaptation measures for the people that live in our region. So that's a very brief summary of why we started CDP back in 2021, and we will obviously be reporting again in this cycle that Helena mentioned for 2024. But it would be remiss of me on the next slide to not talk a little bit about some of the challenges that CDP can represent for us and as a combined authority, and I know that local authorities share similar, so hopefully Helena can forgive me for a couple of kind of just highlighting where it might be tricky. I think you kind of alluded to some yourself, Helena, as well, but capacity is a big one. Especially that first year of reporting, it does take quite a lot of work to pull together the answers. It really does take quite a lot of cross-organisational coordination and collaboration, trying to bring everyone together in the different kind of aspects of the programme that you want to refer to in your reporting. And for us as an organisation, we're relatively new. I think we formed in 2017 as a combined authority, so we haven't really got a whole lot of data, and that's something we're really trying to improve, and CDP has very much provided the basis for us to work out where our data gaps are, where we can try and find more data, because reporting and impact monitoring is a really important part of any organisation, but it was certainly a weak spot for us. So it was really helpful for us to understand, actually, that's somewhere where we're a little bit less developed. I guess when you first start as an organisation and as a combined authority, you kind of focus quite a lot on convening and delivering with your local authority partners. So it's also important to have that monitoring aspect as well. And I mentioned political pressure on the slide as well, because we have found that sometimes it can be a little bit tricky from elected members in terms of the pressure they put on when we're not receiving those top scores, or potentially when some of our local authorities are receiving a top score and others aren't. So it kind of leads to a bit of political pressure, but generally it's been really well received, and our elected members are very enthusiastic about the CDP reporting progress, especially obviously when we're in the A list, which kind of makes sense and is inevitable. Next slide, please. So in terms of the benefits, kind of touched on some of these already in terms of the why around CDP, but accountability is a really big one in terms of making sure that we've got that regular year-on-year reporting to understand the progress we've made and the progress we're making against the targets and goals we've been fairly public about back in 2019 when we declared the climate emergency. And I kind of already said that, but it really does highlight room for improvement. So you do get a really detailed understanding in the feedback form, and it also in the response check period from CDP that they provide. You understand where not only in the reporting you can improve, but also just generally which areas of your work can be improved. And obviously sometimes those are a little bit beyond capacity, but there's something you can kind of build into future plans, so you can look to make those strategic improvements that will ultimately help CDP, but more broadly just to help sort of bring your region along or bring your local authority along in the net zero journey. Data and monitoring improvements. So since CDP launched, since we started reporting, we've launched a data and monitoring platform, online platform, which was kind of partly inspired by CDP and basically our understanding that we had a bit of a gap in data, and that's come on leaps and bounds, and I think CDP has really opened our eyes to that, which has been really welcome. I think Helena said this as well, but it really does support organisational improvement. It's a really useful tool for saying to our elected members who are calling for us to get those A-list kind of rankings, well, we need the political support to do that. We need the finances, we need the budget. So it really is kind of a carrot, I suppose, as opposed to the stick for trying to motivate organisational improvement. And CDP does make you look internally as well at your organisation rather than just kind of the delivery in the region, which is important. And I think this last point is quite critical for us as well, in that, you know, we often think about net zero. It's quite a big topic, and I know that the following presentation is going to do a lot of on adaptation, but we really feel like CDP does give quite a lot of focus to adaptation, which is really welcome, because it's such an important topic that, you know, needs to be done hand in hand with mitigation. So it's a really kind of welcome focus that allows us to understand its importance, and hopefully other local authorities feel similar in terms of understanding the role of climate adaptation. And on my final slide, before I pass over, just kind of a summary of why I would kind of recommend CDP. So as I said, it definitely drives improvement. We found that both internally and externally in terms of looking at areas to improve, provides a really useful year-on-year reflection of progress. Obviously, we did get an A- last year as opposed to an A the year before. So that was really, you know, useful for us to understand where we can improve, and you know, as I said, to make sure that we're not resting on our laurels. It generates a lot of positive news for us, particularly that year we got an A. It was really great to see our programme being recognised, and you know, elected members still talk about that, which is great, real motivation for us. And yeah, I kind of have touched on it, and I know Helen did as well, about the support and response check process. You know, you're not alone basically in your disclosure and reporting. You do get a lot of support, particularly the first year I did it. It was quite an experience, and I really felt like I was very much supported through that process. So yeah, that's kind of at the end of my section, but we definitely recommend CDP. And I'll pass over.
Thank you so much. Thanks to Helena and Matthew for running us through more detail about the benefits of working with CDP. Really, really appreciate that. And we'll be moving on now to hear from Aoiffe as well from Sniffer. So I'll pass directly over to you. Thank you, Aoiffe.
Great, thanks so much, Abby, for inviting me along. I feel like that was quite a good segue, actually, that mention of adaptation into my section. So yeah, I'm Aoiffe Hutton, Senior Climate Resilience Manager at Sniffer, and I'm going to spend the next little while talking a bit more about approaches to climate change adaptation within the public sector. So I work for an organisation called Sniffer. We're based up in Scotland, sustainability charity, although we do work across all nations of the UK and beyond. And really our vision is working towards a better, flourishing future for all in the context of a changing climate. So we have a lot of focus on kind of social issues around that transition towards net zero, climate resilient future. We've got largely kind of 3 different areas of work. So climate ready leadership, climate ready placemaking. So a lot of our work links to the place principle and thinking about places as a holistic concept. And then lastly, climate ready innovation. So we love kind of trying out new approaches. As I said, I'm going to focus this presentation really on adaptation. Often that's kind of our opening into these other topics around social justice and co-benefits and that kind of work towards a better future. So to start us off, what do we mean by climate change adaptation? I'm sure this isn't new to anyone in the call, but just to make that definition clear, it's any action to reduce it can be an organisation, a place's or an individual's vulnerability to the actual or expected impacts of climate change. And that's going to look different in different types of places. So it could be things around looking at how are we designing our places, our buildings, our infrastructure to make sure that they are able to be suitable for current and future climates. The next one is around looking at our flood and drainage infrastructure. This is particularly relevant up in Scotland, where that change in rainfall is one of our main climate impacts that we're dealing with. But adaptation isn't always about your hard measures in terms of infrastructure. It can also be around changing the way we work. So, for example, during the COVID pandemic, in a way that was a kind of large scale example of real big changes and adaptation to the way that folks work. So it can be around contingency planning, systems planning, looking at supply chains. And then we also have many examples of nature-based solutions when it comes to adaptation. So I mentioned trees because they just give us so many different types of benefits, but thinking about the cooling potential that we get from the canopy cover, trees helping with that urban heat island effect when we see more hotter days predicted across our years, but also trees can provide benefits in terms of adapting to changing patterns in rainfall as well. So we see that kind of multiple benefit coming from nature-based solutions. So what do we expect our places to look like going forward? This is a visual we often use. It's from Climate Ready Places, which was developed by Sniffer through our Adaptation Scotland programme. And this is kind of a typical view of a more rural area of Scotland, but we've got similar graphics for different types of landscapes, including urban. So this is kind of business as usual as things currently stand, and we can see there's some issues cropping up here around flooding to the road, difficulties with agriculture again in terms of changes in rainfall, houses and buildings maybe that are seeing more weather related damage. Now, as we move forward in the coming years ahead, this is kind of our direction of travel in terms of what we might expect to see, and it's a little bit of a spot the difference exercise really. But you can see here some land we know needs to be renaturalised, opened up as floodplains. We might need different types of surfacing, so moving away from hard surfacing into more permeable design. We might have localised kind of property level flood defence measures. We might change the types of crops that we're planting and our approach to farming. So those visuals are all available on the Adaptation Scotland website. I'll put a link in the chat shortly, and they can be a really good way to kind of introduce that concept of adaptation through your carbon literacy training. The other term I wanted to bring in today is resilience. So adaptation and resilience, we often use them kind of hand in hand, very similar concepts, but slight difference. So as I mentioned, adaptation is really about those actions that we're taking to reduce the vulnerability, and many different types of adaptation actions are eventually going to lead us towards that more resilient system. So climate resilience we define really as it's the ability to anticipate, prepare for and respond to hazardous climate events, trends or disturbances. So resilience being kind of that overall state that we're wanting to work towards in an adapting place or adapting organisation. So I'm going to talk through a little bit about some examples in terms of public sector work in Scotland. So Sniffer has been running the Adaptation Scotland programme funded by Scottish Government for the last decade or more even at this stage. And really the purpose of that programme is to support public sector, private sector and communities to understand climate risks and how they can adapt to those. So in particular, our work in public sector, and this is the area that I lead in, it's largely based off a framework called the Adaptation Capability Framework, which was developed back in 2019 by an expert working group of organisations within the Scottish public sector who were really leading on approaches to adaptation at that time. And we worked with that group to develop a common approach to adaptation, taking into account that we can't just do a risk assessment and then jump into adaptation action. And I'm sure those of you working in local authorities know that there's a lot more steps in terms of the governance, getting the buy-in, raising the understanding, making sure adequate resources are in place. So this framework is really taking that full holistic understanding to organisational change. And I'm going to talk through that in a little moment. But alongside developing that resource, we've got a really active group of public sector climate adaptation network members, some of whom I think are on the call today. So that group was developed to make sure that our framework is staying up to date, people are actively using it, but also it's kind of developed into this really important peer-to-peer learning space for the public sector in Scotland, looking at common challenges when it comes to adaptation. So we're now a 50-strong network, and that includes 24 local authorities in Scotland. So we've got 32 in total, and 24 of them are actively involved at the moment with that network. So the framework itself, it takes what's known as a capability maturity approach, and it's this idea that all organisations have these different capabilities that they might develop at different speeds and in different strengths, but ultimately developing these different capabilities brings organisations towards being able to adapt and respond well to climate challenges. What the framework doesn't do is tell you exactly how to adapt for your place, but it's more about getting the organisation to a place where good adaptation can happen. So there's 3 main components of the framework. We've got our 4 capabilities. We've then got different maturity stages within those capabilities. And within that, we've got a number of different tasks. So I'm very briefly going to run through our 4 capabilities. So first of all is organisational culture and resources. Within that capability, we've got tasks that are around setting up correct governance in terms of local authorities, making sure that there's accountability structures in place, are the correct resources are set aside in terms of financial resource, but also human resource, making sure that adaptation is formally in people's jobs, roles and responsibilities. Next up, we've got understanding the challenge. So the tasks within that capability are all about creating that organisational awareness of the climate challenge. So within that capability, we've got tasks around learning. So carrying out your carbon literacy training, for example, would fall in underneath your kind of developing your maturity in terms of understanding the challenge, but also doing things like your climate change risk assessment. So again, links in quite well to some of the CDP approach as well. Planning and implementation within that capability, it's all about putting together plans and strategies, reporting on them, and importantly, implementing actions. And then lastly, we've got working together, because we know that when it comes to adaptation, we need that real joined up place-based approach that brings in partners across the region, but also thinking the kind of scale of public sector organisations and local authorities in particular, joining up between service areas so that adaptation is not just seen as the role of a sustainability officer. So within each capability, we've then got our 4 maturity stages. I'm not going to go through this in too much detail today, but we go from the kind of starting stage tasks right up to a mature level. So some of the tasks, as you can see here, they're again ordered underneath their capabilities and then at your 4 different levels of maturity. Not all tasks are going to be relevant for all organisations, so it's very much a kind of pick and choose the tasks that might be relevant for your organisation approach. We do have a benchmarking resource that goes along that. It's not mandatory reporting. Again, some organisations choose to use this approach to really help them with their internal project planning. Some local authorities in Scotland have put it as one of their kind of main KPIs that's reported to leadership. So the purpose of benchmarking is really to red, amber, green those 50 different tasks that are included within the framework and get an idea of your maturity level across the 4 capabilities. It also helps illustrate what you've already done when it comes to adaptation and highlight where improvements or more resource might be needed, and supports with that project planning. So this is the output from that benchmarking assessment, and again, some organisations kind of have a year-on-year approach to that, making sure that those that feed into the assessment are represented from different service areas as well, so we get that cross-organisational view. So what's the impact of all this been in our work in Scotland? So organisations who have been involved with the network have tended to score higher when it does come to their statutory adaptation reporting requirements. So in Scotland, under the Climate Change Act, public bodies are required to report both on progress towards mitigation and adaptation, and generally those involved using the framework and part of that network are scoring higher in the adaptation space, which is great to see. But also what we really recognise through this work is the huge value in peer-to-peer learning, not just from our network, but any sort of networks like the one today as well, thinking about how we can share and kind of not reinvent the wheel, but look at where are those common challenges, where do we know we need to advocate for more in terms of policy change and so on. The framework provides a common approach, but it also needs to remain flexible and iterative as time goes on. We've seen good buy-in from local authorities in Scotland in terms of this approach. Many have chosen to integrate it into their annual KPIs. And also really positively in the last year or so, we've seen the kind of reach of this approach beyond the individual organisations. So supply chains starting to get more involved. So an example with Fife College recently, where the building contractors and the architects they were using for a new campus have got really involved in kind of thinking about adaptation from the outset of that building project. And that's exactly what we want to see. So I'm just going to touch on a few more things before we close up for questions. So I mentioned our approach to place as well, and I'm less familiar south of the border in terms of the place-based approach in England and elsewhere. But what we're really starting to see in Scotland is this emergence of place-based partnerships, regional adaptation partnerships, when it comes to adaptation. And you can see the map on the right-hand side. We've attempted to kind of map out the kind of current coverage in Scotland by these different partnerships. Now, they all take kind of various models. They've got different origins, but in many cases, what we're seeing with the partnerships is that it's been a local authority that's had that initial convening role. It's also brought in community partners, partners from the private sector, and this type of place-based partnership adaptation work is really gaining momentum, with lots of them able to secure funding as a collective to then have that kind of ongoing sustaining work happening. In the Scottish National Adaptation Plan, which is currently in draft, we expect to see that published in November. One of the outcomes we expect to see finalised is that Scotland have full coverage of these types of partnerships by 2029. So we're very much working to support that aim. And the last thing I'm going to note is just around adaptation at a local scale as well. So I know many on the call will be working with communities more locally. We developed the community climate adaptation route map quite recently, and it draws together 20 examples of adaptation action that could be carried out by local community groups in different forms, community councils, different types of interest groups. This was a really collaborative project with our partners. And it was so interesting for me because I went about thinking about climate hazards, adaptation actions that respond to hazards. What we heard very quickly from our community partners was, no, that's not how anyone actually thinks. What we want to see these actions do is address other priorities within the community. So we came up with these 5 different co-benefits, and that's what all of the actions in this route map are framed around. So regenerating nature, improving housing in neighbourhoods, supporting self-sufficiency, getting around, and growing skills and employment. So that resource is really a map of those 20 different actions, and we link out to lots of different examples of communities already delivering on these actions. Just to zoom in on one in particular a little bit more, this is under the regenerate nature theme, and we've got examples of kind of small scale actions right up to more kind of transformational types of adaptation actions. So thinking about the way that land is used and managed, or at a smaller scale, looking at restoration of gardens and community spaces. The route map is for a range of different audiences, but we also know some local authorities have kind of taken that and used it in terms of different engagement workshops as well, just making adaptation a bit more of a tangible concept too. So I'll finish up there, almost right on time. But just to flag some next steps really from our perspective is to have a look at the Adaptation Scotland website. We've got a huge amount of free resources on there that can be brought into your training materials. And if anyone is interested in learning more specifically on climate adaptation and risk, we've got a training course that's really geared up at sustainability professionals, and that's called Becoming Climate Resilient Training. So if you're working in climate but not in the adaptation space, it's a really good kind of one-day intro course to get a grip around those concepts. So I'll close up there, and thanks very much.
Thank you so much, Aoiffe, and it's really, really heartening to see that sort of like community thread woven through both of those really amazing frameworks. So yeah, thank you so much. You did a great job of presenting, and to Matthew as well, and Helena. I think Laura was keeping an eye on Q&A, so I don't know if there was any questions that you wanted to ask on behalf of the audience, Laura.
Yeah, so I'm just waiting for a few more to come in. Someone's asked for Matthew if all local authorities in West Midlands Combined Authority are currently reporting with CDP.
Great question. And the answer is, as of well, Helena might be able to correct me, but I'm pretty sure the answer is no. So I think a majority are, but we've had this discussion actually. There's a few other kind of disclosure organisations and opportunities. Climate Emergency UK do climate scorecards and so on, and we kind of all decided as a collective that CDP was the one we wanted to do as kind of one that we could give the most credibility to, and is kind of the most sort of accurate and representative. So I'm very much hoping that this year all 7 of our local authorities will be, but unfortunately not at this stage.
Yeah, I can add to that. We currently have 5 reporting, so it would be great to get all of them.
So I was wondering actually if I can ask about the sort of like mechanisms for like leveraging in that community engagement, like what sorts of like events or like campaigns like comms and things like that might have worked, if that's a question that anyone has an answer to from either organisation.
Yeah, I'm happy to start off on that one. I think definitely in our work developing the route map resource, it was just that total reframing away from talking about climate hazards like overheating and flooding, and thinking about what do people actually want to see in their area, what are the co-benefits, and how can adaptation be a vehicle for that. And that approach as well has helped folk unlock different sources of funding as well. So yeah, just that really strong link around adaptation is an opportunity to do things differently and to improve these places in different ways.
Awesome, thank you. I don't know if anyone from CDP or Matthew, if you wanted to chime in on that. No pressure. Okay, great. So yeah, I think that's where we'll call an end to the session for today. It's been so great to have everyone along. I will send out the slides, which will have all the links and things in for you, and you can feel free to get in touch with any of us. I just wanted to take a second to do a final plug for carbon literacy stuff as well. Is there a question, or was that you, Aoiffe, putting something in? I think that was. I'll just carry on. There's a couple of events coming up for us at Carbon Literacy. So we have our Connect and Catch Up session, which will be on the 5th of June. And we'll actually be talking with someone from Warrington Borough Council about their work with an Innovate UK project. And we'll also be hearing from one of our trusted training partners about rolling out training for elected members as well, in sort of the settling of the dust after the local elections that have happened recently. So yeah, I think, Helena, if you want to chime in now.
Yeah, no, I just noticed a question in the chat. It's for Matthew, actually, just to flag that.
Cool.
Awesome, thank you.
Can I answer now? Happy to.
Yes, please.
Yeah. Cool. So it basically, for those who haven't seen it, says we've got around 15% of our council staff certified. Have we targeted any certain department? So initially our approach was very much organisation as a whole. So we kind of opened up the training to everyone, and that was kind of pretty productive at the first. We found we got a lot of good sign-ups, and then as we've kind of probably covered the more enthusiastic people, we have done since then a more targeted approach. So for example, we have a session in September which is booked just for comms colleagues. So the comms team will be coming along and doing a carbon literacy training. It will be the same training, but it is kind of targeted at one department, whereas previously it was kind of been a cross organisation. And to be honest, I prefer it when it's cross organisation, because I don't know about other local authorities, but we do tend to be quite siloed sometimes. It's really great to get people in the room that you've never met before that come from all different departments. So I think there's really value in that, but I guess there's also value in us able to be able to tailor it slightly to comms colleagues. So yeah, hopefully that answers your question, Jamie.
Yeah, great. And I'll just chime in on that as well, which is that the generic staff toolkit that we have for carbon literacy contains 3 different pathways, which can really support with that sort of mixture of colleagues from across all different areas of councils. There's actually a documentary pathway, which can help with people watching things before they come to in-person sessions, and you can do it online as well. There's also an e-learning method. So we've got lots of flexibility in how that learning can be rolled out. But we're almost at exactly 4 o'clock. So well done to everyone for presenting, and thank you everyone for coming along. And I'll be sending out the slides to all of the attendees afterwards with the links and things. And yeah, maybe see you in June for our Connect and Catch Up session for carbon literacy. But otherwise, thank you and have a great rest of your week.
Thank you.
Thank you.